If I've got any proof, it's that it's never easy, it's never a straight line, and there's a string of failures underpinning anything on the surface that looks like a success. People ask me all the time, how do I know when I'm ready? I have a clear answer. You have no idea when you're ready. If there's one thing that I say always matters, it's who you surround yourself with.
Welcome to Winning Cultures in SMB. I'm your host, Kai Sato. Today we are joined by Dan Simons, co-founder, Founding Farmers Restaurant Group. Thanks for taking some time, Dan.
Kai, thanks for having me.
I get the privilege of speaking to not only a proven entrepreneur, but a proven podcaster, host, a guy who has worn a lot of hats and will continue to wear some. Would you mind just giving our audience, if they aren't familiar, a little bit of primer on you and how the company came to be, and we'll kind of expand from there?
If I've got any proof, it's that it's never easy, it's never a straight line, and there's a string of failures underpinning anything on the surface that looks like a success. I started my first company with my business partner when I was 33 years old. So when I got out of college, I'd always worked in bars and restaurants. I spent the first 10 years out of college working for other people. So I was an early 30s entrepreneur, and I'm mid 50s now. I'll be 56 this summer. So I've got one business partner. We worked together before we started our company together. Everything we've done, we have done together along the way. And now we have built what is called Farmers Restaurant Group. The brand name of the restaurant is Founding Farmers. We have 8 full-service restaurants, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We have a full-service catering and events company. We have our own distillery. And what makes the company unique is that our majority investors are a large group of American family farmers. So we're really devoted to running the company through the eyes of the farmer, and we care deeply about where our profits go to, which is more than just what we buy. It's actually where our profits go. But that's my high level. We'll do about 100 million in sales this year, total revenue. We have about 1,500 employees.
Incredible. A lot to unpack there. And before we get into the culture and how you guys have built this and how it's scaled and how it's evolved, I want to better understand you and your story and how you got involved, Dan, with the hospitality space. I understand that you were bussing tables, you put yourself through college, you went to work at a couple of different restaurants. Would you mind expanding on that for the audience?
Yeah, and I was really fortunate. My parents paid for college. So I put a lot of spending cash in my pocket through college. I worked full-time all through college, but I certainly cannot take the credit. And I had the absolute privilege and the good fortune that my folks were able to pay for college for me. I started working freshman year at the local bar. I went to George Washington University in DC. And, I'd always worked, since I was 13 or 14, just growing up north of Boston. Summer jobs, mowing lawns, landscaping, my generation, it was like, that's what we did. We worked in the summer and rode our bikes and stayed out, too late and drank beer in the woods. I'm fond of being a Gen Xer. And then I got to college and school was fine. And I liked classroom. The academics were fine, but nothing super motivating for me. And I just fell in love with at first being a busboy and then being a doorman, then being a bar back, and then being a bartender. And, I was an athlete in high school. I tried in college. It just wasn't good enough to wrestle there, D1 program. So I really missed sports. And the restaurants totally filled my cup for being part of a team. And I loved getting ready for a Friday night, whether it was like whatever, cutting lime wedges, making sure enough beer mugs were in the freezer, whatever it was. I just loved that you didn't do it alone. Like, cool, the team's got to get ready. We need a plan. And the customers would all leave at the end of the night. The place was a mess. We had to clean it up. So I just fell in love with the business in college.
Where was the first gig? Where did you first start working? Which restaurant?
I was working at a bar called The Exchange on G Street, F Street, G Street in DC, just a couple blocks west of the White House.
As you guys got further along, you worked at couple of chains and then help grow a pretty big chain before moving off and becoming an entrepreneur. Is that right?
Yeah, I got some great advice from one of my college professors. It was junior year. And lots of other students were doing internships or getting more, let's call it serious jobs. And this professor said to me, um, hey, if you're not going to get a more professional type internship opportunity and you're working this much, maybe you should work for a restaurant corporation instead of just this independent bar. And I said, well, what's a restaurant corporation? I didn't really know. And he sort of explained to me about the industry and talked to me about independence versus restaurant companies, and there are public companies out there and how they're run and et cetera. And then the timing was good. TGI Fridays started advertising that they were hiring and opening a restaurant on campus. So I did what this professor said, and I got hired with TGI Fridays in 1990. And man, just a well-run company, professional systems, organization. Just as a bartender, the training was insane and serious. We had to study, and I got to see professional restaurant managers and all of these kitchen operating systems. And then they offered me a job upon graduation to go into management. So I worked for Fridays, and I got to see that company. Um, I think probably people can relate to this if they've been with a company that's going through fast growth. Certainly in the restaurant business, what gets a restaurant company popular, let's call it scratch cooking, fresh food, those things often get in the way of a restaurant company that wants to scale. So when I started at Fridays, the kitchens were big. We made everything from scratch. I have blanched a lot of I smashing those potatoes, making French fries, blanching those French fries, scooping those potato skins, like really like doing the stuff from scratch. By the time I left Fridays, 6 years after I started, the kitchens were small. There was no prep kitchen. Nothing was made from scratch. Everything came in frozen. So I got to see that transition, have opinions about it, but just see the business of it. And so then I left and went to Cheesecake Factory. And I started at Cheesecake when they had 6 locations. So, people hear that now and it's like, oh, you went to work for that huge company. No, I went to work for a tiny little company that had just opened its 6th restaurant. And I got to see Cheesecake from sort of restaurant 6 to restaurant 20. Then I did one more job working for other people, which was a market and bakery called Eatsies. And that really opened my eyes well beyond just full service restaurants. I got to see a market, fresh food retail, consumer packaged goods, scratch bakery, pastry shop, catering. Really, I learned a lot there. And it was a startup. We started with one, but it was backed by Brinker. And Brinker, at the time, one of the biggest restaurant companies out there. They own Chili's. But they own Macaroni Grill. They own a ton of stuff. But I got to see a startup, store one, but backed by big money. So that grew to about 75 million. The wheels came off, et cetera. And that was my work for other people experience that got me to, I was 33 when I quit that job and started the business.
So how'd you make that leap? What's that founding story? What were the non-negotiables? Because you'd seen a lot at that point in time. Who were you working with?
People ask me all the time, young folks, older folks, who want to be entrepreneurs, how do I know when I'm ready? I have a clear answer. You have no idea when you're ready. You can't know if you're ready, and nobody else can tell you if you're ready. So I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I filed for my first patent for a thing in college, didn't get it, but I'd written a bunch of business plans. But I loved working for other people and being part of a team, but I had this itch. I don't think I was destined to be an entrepreneur. I think that each of those employers, in one way or another, either didn't want to keep me or wasn't good enough to keep me. And maybe history would show that they should have, because I could have created value for them. So what launched me into being an entrepreneur was facing this reality of I can't find someone that I'm inspired to work for that I feel can really teach me, utilize me, and give me opportunity. So I felt like I was sort of forced into it. I wasn't overly confident. I didn't think like, oh, this is my destiny. I just thought, well, of my choices, I could take another job. And I was interviewing at the time for kind of VP of operations jobs and maybe $100 million a year companies, 200 million, something in that range. That's what I was qualified for. And I'd walk out of the interviews and I would think, yeah, fuck this. Like, it's not exciting. What am I gonna? Why is it good for me? And I had such a negative experience with the private equity guys that had bought my final job. Like the reason I was leaving that business, I became old management. Negotiated an exit, had a good 6 or 7 months severance. But I just share all this to say, uh, I made the decision to do the entrepreneurship thing because it seemed like the best of all my options and frankly the lowest risk on the like happiness quotient. I was just ready to blame myself if it didn't go well instead of having criticism for those above me, and that's what propelled me. But you'll notice I didn't do it alone. I joined forces with Mike Vucurevich. We had worked together prior, and I don't think I would have had the courage or known what to do. I just love 1+1 is 3. Like that math has worked for me on every team I've ever been on and every relationship I've ever been in. So that was sort of my recipe of why I went down the entrepreneurial route. It just seemed better than taking another job that maybe I wasn't going to be thrilled with or that wasn't going to give me the opportunity to maximize.
Were you bouncing ideas off of people? Were you saying to your spouse or your parents, or was anyone trying to lay down in traffic and stop you, Dan?
No one was trying to stop me. My wife, and she's still my wife, Susie, she's just amazing. We had just, I say we, she had just had our first child, because let's be serious, the guy doesn't have to do a fucking thing, except the fucking thing, excuse my language on your show. So Cooper, who's my oldest, was just born, and I was just saying, I'm just not happy. And Suze was just clear. She's like, well, quit your job. We'll figure it out. And I said, you're okay with that? Well, we got to provide for the family. Now we have our kid. And she was like, yeah, like ever since I've known you, you've been happy in your job. You're not happy right now. Just go for it. We'll figure it out. So she was, I would say, my biggest fan. And through thick and thin, from us being broke, living in our mom's basement for 3 years, in those moments where I was saying, I just got to give up and go get a job, she was the one saying, don't do that. We'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. So, and I knew that if I was going to start a business, I mean, restaurants is what I loved. It's what I knew how to do. So the plan was, how do we figure out how to open our own restaurants? So that was the launch for me. I hope it sounds pretty unclear and pretty unglamorous, because guy, that is the truth. There was no epiphany. There was no this is obvious. It was kind of murky.
Well, I think the most important stuff is there. Quite literally, I'm fortunate to be married to someone like that. Her name's Jacqueline, and 1+1=3 is engraved into her wedding ring. That's what my mentor, who actually founded Mace Rich, his name is Mace Siegel. He's no longer with us, but Tyson's Corner out by
Sure.
you. Mace is literally the guy hanging behind me right there. And so he always talked about, it's not just 1+1=3. How does that become 5 and 10? And also just only working with good people. But you have to have the right people in your corner, because this shit's hard. And it's hard to even, I think you guys statistically went the smarter route, which is you go work in an industry and then you take the plunge usually after a number of years or even a decade. And statistically, if you've taken some vocational knowledge, some resources, and you go into that same vertical, those are the entrepreneurs that will generally do better. We were kind of the idiots on the other side where, we won the business plan prize and unfortunately raised more money than we maybe deserved and set it on fire and had to keep pivoting and do all the stuff that you do until you find the business model and figure it out. But it's a slog, and it'd be way, way worse without the right people around you. And for part of that journey for me, I didn't have it. So it was it's great to hear that at least you were on terra firma from that standpoint because, allocating the 168 hours in the week is hard enough as it is.
And Kai, first of all, I love that we share the 1+1 is 3. That's just a pretty cool moment for us. So thank you for sharing that. Um, Without the team around you and without experience, I don't know how people do it. I mean, I really admire young people start a business, let alone as you're describing, get capital and end up being successful. I look at that and I think, how how do you figure out how to do that? I mean, I had a decades plus worth of the exact experiences and knowledge. And by the way, Mike and I's first restaurant failed and closed. That was what led to living in Susie's mom's basement for 3 years and destroying all of the savings I had from my corporate jobs that I had quit with what I thought was enough savings. So even with all that, tactical experience, boy, it was still hard. So when young people do it, and this is why I don't take the wind out of any entrepreneur's sails. If you want to go for it, you go for it, because I might advocate go get 10 years of experience. That's no guarantee either. And maybe the naivete and the fact that you haven't had X number of years of being shown other ways to do it opens you up to new stuff. It's there's no right path for this. But if there's one thing that I say always matters, it's who you surround yourself with.
I think that's well said. And for the younger people, at least for us, ignorance, right? It was just that. It's the naivete, it's the ignorance. You do not know your ass from your elbow. You don't know what you're getting into. You're certainly full of confidence and chutzpah, but that doesn't necessarily help you. And then you very quickly get humbled, or at least we did. And then you start getting better and you start surrounding yourself with better people. Or I never read a book in college. And then all of a sudden I was reading 2 a week, and you're just trying to drink through the fire hose and to make it. And, some people do, right? You've got the Phil Knight shoe dog paths of the world, and you've got the Zuckerberg paths of the world and yours. And so I think it does come down to the entrepreneurs, and given enough time and surrounded by the right people, they'll make something stick. Try to remember that, like, Nintendo started as literally a playing card company, right? And Amazon started by selling books to the internet. So if you just get something to stick, you can almost always parlay it. And I'm going to force you to hear more about some of these strands of your business now. But before we even dive further into that and your culture today, will you tell us about the failure? I mean, you guys invested, maybe even raised capital, signed a lease, designed menus, hired staff, did all the stuff. And even with your industry knowledge, what went wrong?
I have a couple of clear lessons of our failure. And let me tell you, Kai, I own that failure. So I'll share the lessons, but they represent internal shortcomings. Number one, we were not financially strong enough, both in our personal lives and nor with the amount of capital we raised, to withstand our own mistakes and to withstand the time of the learning curve. So we developing the restaurant took us a bit longer than we thought. There's you're paying dummy fees at almost every turn. Every vendor you hire, there's the dummy fee, the dummy tax. You just don't know. And you love your own ideas because they're totally out of context of reality. So of course, entrepreneurs love their own ideas, and then you deploy them and then they don't work. And so we didn't go fast enough. We didn't have enough financial resilience so that when we went over budget, or that the restaurant didn't bloom fast enough that we could withstand it. I didn't understand that only the strong survive. I had worked for TGI Fridays, Cheesecake Factory, and then Cheesecake was going public, and Phil Romano, super wealthy guy, and Brinker International. So I hadn't understood how much cash you need in the bank to do a startup, because you get a lot of stuff wrong. So we got a lot of stuff wrong. So there were a set of lessons. Then the other lesson really clearly for me, I was living in Texas at the time, in Dallas, and we chose a location well outside of the city, like sort of Texas suburbs. And we were doing a kind of Southern fried chicken concept. Not super expensive to build or to run. We had done several consulting projects because that was we started a consulting business. It's sort of ironic when the consultants fail in the space that they're getting paid to coach in. And we were sure, wow, we're going to open a fried chicken place. Look how popular these places are. We're going to use better chicken, better oil. We're going to use fresh vegetables. The green beans will be green. We're going to do Lipton. And we're not going to do Lipton iced tea. We're going to do a better tea. We're going to do this sort of elevated thing. Because all of our research, we just looked at the existing providers in these towns. And instead of asking, what does the customer want? How satisfied or dissatisfied are they? You know, the line is like find a need and fill it. Well, I missed that. And instead, I decided there was a need and we filled it. Like, hey, customer, we know better than you. You want and deserve an elevated restaurant concept. And we opened it in the wrong place. Had we opened that restaurant in downtown Dallas or uptown Dallas or one of those neighborhoods, I think we would have done well. But the customer that we were giving this to, and value wasn't a problem, but they were clear. This iced tea tastes funny. Oh, well, it's all natural and it doesn't have all the chemicals that Lipton has in it. And they're looking at me thinking, are you criticizing Lipton? They're like, why are the green beans so green? Well, they're fresh green beans. And, those green beans that you're used to are out of a can. And they're just like, who do you think you are? So the lesson for us was, I think unless you're fucking Steve Jobs, you just can't think you know better than your customer. And look, I was not inventing some brilliant new thing that never existed that I would show people you need this in your pocket. We were just trying to satisfy hungry people. So we took all of those recipes and, as we recovered from that failure, and a lot of those recipes and our lessons, both the mistakes and what we saw worked, and that is what was the foundation for founding Farmers. So I'm glad the failure happened, but Kai, we'd raised capital from friends, family, and fools. We'd signed personally on the lease. We'd signed personally on the bank debt. We destroyed $600,000 of, people who believed in us, of equity capital that we didn't have to pay back and didn't pay back. And we destroyed $1 million of liability that we had to pay back. And it took us 10 years to pay it back. But we didn't file bankruptcy. We paid all our employees. We did right. We negotiated with the landlords and we did the bankers and we did what we needed to do. 10 years. We called it the bonfire. It was like we were making a little bit of money, you just throw it on the bonfire. So that was the beginning story.
That's a real one. One thing that we talk about with all of our companies, and it's because we learned the hard way, is do they have a culture of customer centricity, right? And you think it's so obvious, but as you just touched on, Dan, we didn't know who our first customer was, the first business, and, it kept moving around. And there's actually video of almost a seance led by Eric Ries, who wrote The Lean Startup, and Jason Calcanis at the time, who were in LA promoting the book. And I nudged my business partner. He went up there and they cured him of our relentless pivoting, or in fact, the need to make the biggest pivot of our lives at that time. And we ultimately came back and signed a manifesto and figured out which path we were going to go down and things like that. And so when I meet with teams now at all stages, later stage businesses, startups, family businesses, it doesn't matter, just that customer centricity piece. Not surprisingly, you guys weren't, you thought you were coming into it with all the answers, as we all do. And I think I still make the mistake of plenty of times whenever I'm trying to do something, but, whether or not you have it. As you guys turn this thing around, started to build what is now Founding Farmers, how did you know to involve the farmers? How did you pick your location? Where did we kind of start to get going and find some footing and grow into what it is today?
There's some real luck at this point in the story. And Kai, I don't know how you feel on your journey, but I feel like for all of us as entrepreneurs, it's an obligation that we should amplify this reality. I think there's luck for all of us. And if anyone is out there preaching, like, here's the exact way I did it, especially when it's someone did it alone. So, look, I don't know about anybody else, but I know in my story, um, we so Mike and I, we quit our jobs, we started a consulting business, then we opened our first restaurant. The restaurant failed. The consulting business was growing and still successful. We had no idea what we were doing, but we did have content, and we brought a restaurateur's work ethic to consulting, which was apparently not it was people weren't used to that. They were sort of they were used to the Monday through Friday consultant and the 3-ring binder consultant and deliverable. And we were restaurant guys saying, let's get in there and we'll show you how to do it. So we helped a lot of clients. I built a website. This was 2004, 2003, 2004. So it was early in the days of the web. And so I learned a bit about search engine optimization. I got Google to love us. So you could be sitting anywhere in the world, and if you typed restaurant consultant into Google, we ranked first. And one day we got a phone call into our consulting firm, which looked like a pretty substantial company from our website, and was still me and Mike, freelance contractor that we needed them. And I was still living in Susie's mom's basement. So that was the status. But we got a phone call from a guy from the North Dakota Farmers Union, which is what it sounds like. It's a group of American family farmers from North Dakota. And he said, hey, we're looking for a consultant. We've invested in a restaurant because we like this sort of vertical integration, tell our independent family farmer story. We invested in a restaurant. We're getting killed. We're losing our money. We think we got the wrong folks doing it for us. We're not restaurateurs. We're farmers. Can you help us? I said, sure. Because that's you. When you're a consultant, your first answer is absolutely, I can do that. That was the beginning of a relationship that still exists today. So if you just speed through it, we consulted and helped them on their initial restaurant, which was failing. We cut their burn rate. We solved their problems. We took their restaurant over as a management company. They were in a bad spot. They'd signed a $10 million corporate guarantee on a huge lease. They were hemorrhaging cash. Like, they had no easy way out. So we did a good job. We performed for them and got them results. And then they said to us, hey, we'd love to do more with you. We love this farmer-owned restaurant idea, and we think now we've found the right people. Will you do it for us? And we said, well, we won't do it for you, but we will do it with you. Because yes, we own the consulting firm, but we want to own our own restaurant. So, for us to really do this, our true best foot forward comprehensively. So we negotiated a deal with them, and that gave birth to Farmers Restaurant Group, and they became our partner and our largest capital partner and our mission partner. And we put their ideas about a farmer-owned restaurant together with our ideas of what that would be. And we created Founding Farmers with them, for them. And we've grown the company. And, to this day, so here we are 18 years later, they're still our partner. They're the best capital partner ever. They're a mission-driven partner. Capital comes with strings attached. Their strings are clear. Stay true to the quality. Buy from American family farmers. Do business in an honest way. Take care of your community. Take care of your people. Think about the backbone of America, which and obviously I believe is family farming. And a lot of capital comes with other types of strings attached. So we've been through thick and thin, and they don't press us out till, lower the quality to make more profit. We do have other very important investors who have absolutely been vital and continue to be vital to the growth of the company, who are maybe more of your typical high net worth folks who have the ability to invest in, restaurant private placements. So we've raised capital along the way, but the farmers have been in every time along the way, and will be, I think, forever.
So it started with North Dakota. Are there other states, regions? Is it a national group? What does that look like?
So we have the North Dakota Farmers Union, Minnesota Farmers Union. We've got some Michigan Farmers Union, and then I have a whole stack of independent family farmers as individuals. And one of the unique things that our North Dakota partners created was a way for non-accredited investors to be able to have access to this kind of private placement. So they created a vehicle that they could bring in so farmers could put in $2,000, $1,000, $10,000. Some could put in $50,000, whatever, but they didn't have to be accredited investors. And then that vehicle invests on their behalf into the restaurants. So that is really pretty cool. So every time we go to raise capital, those independent farmers, and sometimes they'll expand that to more individuals. So we have individuals, we have farm organizations. We now have the National Farmers Union as well, which is representing the state level farmers unions. And so as these guys generate profits, they can do more advocacy, resources, support, education on behalf of the independent family farmers that are their members.
Very cool. You guys, we're going to have a lot more to expand upon, even though you can't tell by looking at me, Dan. My mother's got blonde hair and blue eyes. She's a Swedish gal from Minnesota. So I actually lived in Minnesota for 1 year of my life while my Japanese father was attempting to start a tofu company in the mid-90s that failed miserably, but I spent a lot of time in the Dakotas as well. I used to buy my fireworks in Fargo, and you drove all across that state, and it was very unique, especially because farming was such a big part of our community, and kids could drive awfully early. They did not need to be 16 years old, and they didn't even get cars. They got like new tractors and stuff like that. So coming from Arizona as a kid, it was a little bit of a culture shock, but there's some damn good people there, and now I've got so many friends who are in farming, and one of my best friends from boarding school and college helps run the livestock program here in California. And so it's, I think there's been a massive paradigm shift, and clearly you guys have been a part of it, of wanting to know where your food actually comes from, and thinking about the people who source it, not just nationally, but internationally.
And a lot of Americans have just been raised to think that food sort of grows off the stainless steel shelf at the grocery store. So when we, opened the first Founding Farmers in 2008, it was really early in this discussion about where the food comes from, or, how the environmental impact of building a restaurant, just these things around community. And for us, because we believed deeply in the message, the motivation wasn't to have it be a marketing strategy. And I think this is important. It's turned out to be a very effective marketing strategy, but not because we sat around in a boardroom and said, what's the marketing strategy? So authenticity, I think it matters. I realize there are plenty of companies that it's not authentic. I mean, Haagen-Dazs, right? If you know that story, it's like the absolute least authentic brand name ever. I think it's just like the ice cream dude from New Jersey who wanted a bougie sounding name. Kai, when I hear your story, though, my hunch is part of what makes you such a successful entrepreneur is that just like the family that you come from, right? Like your dad's an immigrant, your mom has her background, you're a child of parents from different perspectives. You learned about Middle America and that farming. You saw your dad's struggle. You also look how you look ethnically, and that is different than one of your parents, just going off what you've described. I think that these human ingredients that give you perspective, understanding, empathy, drive, for any entrepreneur, it's good whether you're currently an entrepreneur or you're running a big company, or you're thinking about it, wherever you're at. Each person deserves to be reminded that they have wildly valuable ingredients in them. And maybe they haven't bloomed yet, or they bloom to a point and, you're running a company and you hit a struggle. There's just a lot of aptitude in there that comes from these journeys. So that's just what was coming up for me as I was hearing you tell that story. And so for me, like framing it, it's like, for each of us, including what like you think is like in my case, like what's kind of broken in me or where my glitches are. we can create that value, but we need help from each other. And this is why I love mentors, a board of directors, advisors, investors who speak up, investors who come in as guides. Any of these things help us be that best version of ourselves. So I hope we don't mind me going on too much about you or making some assumptions there, but that's just what it feels like to me.
Well, thank you, Dan. That's far too kind of you. And I think it's germane to you, your story, but also these teams that we're going to force you to elaborate further on. But I was super lucky to go to a boarding school on full scholarship when I was 14, and I would encourage anyone to just let your world get expanded by something like that, because you're around. I didn't know where Latvia was, and there was a princess from there, right? And there are things like that you just don't get. And then similar to your bussing tables, I worked as a caddy in college. And so you learn service awfully fast. And especially for someone who grew up most of my life without my dad around after the soybean stuff, I've had a litany of mentors who have been so transformational. So I think if you get out there on your own, like working in a restaurant, and you're going to be on a team and you're going to learn, you're going to deal with some difficult people, you're hopefully going to deal with some great people, and you're going to figure out what works for you. And do you want to be on the product side or the sales side? Because we're either making something or selling something, right? And so I think all of that type of stuff. You said it well, the human ingredients. I've never heard that before, and I'm absolutely stealing it. But it's I think that is it. And what kind of drives any of us is hopefully that path towards self-actualization. So if you wouldn't mind, without further ado, what's the team look like today? How do you define your culture? Who gets on the team? Who do you have to take out? What is the culture for Founding Farmers?
So Mike and I, with several of our other key people, when we started the company, we knew that we needed to write down what we believed, what we were trying to accomplish, the why, the how. So it's our 8-page manifesto. We decided to call it the Constitution because we wanted it to be bigger and more powerful than either of us, bigger and more powerful than our North Dakota farmer partners. We wanted the mission of the company. We wanted this living document to be everybody's guide. No mystery, no politics as to how do you be successful in this company or why is this company here. So our culture is underpinned by a written document, written clearly in English and Spanish. And the Spanish is not sort of, in black and white stapled at the end of the color copy. Actually, we built the booklet, so it's got 2 front covers. You flip it over and you're looking at the front in Spanish. You flip it over the other way and turn it. You're looking at the cover in English. So it really sends a message of no second-class citizens. We knew we were going to build a company with a lot of English as a second language folks who would be the backbone and the contributors, and that thought has proven to be true and still is to this day. So we wrote our culture down. That was the first step. And not by Mike and I just writing down everything we believe, but by pulling our people together at that first restaurant and making sure it included art. And we really wordsmithed it and got it there. And that Constitution has survived and thrived to this day. We've made some edits to it over the years, not many. We teach a class on it. Mike and I, every time we hire new folks, we teach the class ourselves. It's a 3-hour class that we've been doing for 18 years on just bringing it to life. And as far as who gets in the company and who needs to, whether they decide or we decide it's time for them to not be in the company, gets pulled through the Constitution. So we use this written Constitution to build our recruiting material, to build the selection tests we use, personality intelligence tests we use, the interview process, so that we're hiring not just talent, but talent that's a culture match for us. I've worked with people over the years that they're just not a match. They go on to some other company. They're awesome. It's no different than when you see people get divorced and it's a train wreck, and then they marry the right match and things are great. So that's how we strive to decide who joins the company, is by running a pretty extensive process, testing interviews, like 5 steps of interviews, of we call it a stage in the restaurant industry. You know, they come in and they work on the shift with us and they get to spend time. We have opinions from lots of different people on the team. We try to pay substantially above the industry average. One, to sort of reward people and have them be excited to join us. And two, to put up a substantial wall. People love to recruit our managers and then they find out how much we pay them and it's a problem. So, and as far as who needs to leave the company, probably the people that aren't successful with us, the majority of the time, it's on us. Sometimes we just didn't choose well. We didn't choose well. They didn't reveal everything. It's just not a match. But more often, it's when we don't give good enough training and when we put too much on people. You know, someone can't do something they're not capable of doing. So if you're the bosses and that's what you put on someone and then they fail at it, whose fault is it? It's the boss's fault. So sometimes we don't understand how difficult it is what we're asking to do, or we don't match up the expectation with someone's skill set. We don't give the training and support. You know, our industry, we run pretty lean. And so we don't always make the right investment, I think, in developing people. And then sometimes now that we've been around almost 20 years, we outgrow people. And which is why, you know, people think I'm a little strange when I see it, but it's why I'm a fan of divorce. I'm a fan of breaking up. I'm a fan of changing jobs. If you have a good enough process and open communication and you can get clear of, we just shouldn't be together anymore. You know, we've grown. And if that includes that we have grown apart, great, we've grown apart. Like, we don't need some crazy diagnosis or anger. So sometimes we're a different company at around 100 million than we were at 4 million or 8 million. And what I always tried to push us to, and when I talk to other business folks, I love these conversations, is like, you know, look in the mirror and then tell the truth and be a good listener. So whoever you're working with can tell their truth. And then you figure out, like, should we still work together? Yes or no? So I'm not a big power guy. I just try to hold up the mirror and look in it and hold up the mirror for other people and get them to look at it. And we have really low turnover. So like my sales pitch to myself on this approach, it's not pain, fear, or force. Like, that's just not, I know you can train a dog with pain, fear, or force. That's not how I train my dog. So why would I want to be treated like that as a human? I don't think it's how you get the best out of people. And the metrics prove it out. For us, the higher the employee satisfaction, the higher the guest satisfaction. And if you retain people for the right reasons in the right way, you build a loyalty. And then sometimes people hit a ceiling that you got to have open conversations. Like, yeah, you've been awesome, but currently you're not able to. So should you leave the company? Or can we do something to help you find version 2.0 or 3.0 or 4.0? They're really rewarding, albeit sometimes difficult conversations. And probably what I'm most proud of in the company, because we play an important role in people's journeys and their lives, whether they stay with us forever or they move on to something awesome.
Yeah, I think it's well said. Change is constant, right? We talk a lot about how creative destruction is undefeated, right? And steal stuff from Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett and guys who have been doing this a lot longer than we have, but I think do it the right way. And, you know, if we didn't break up, you know, we'd still be the first person that we dated when we were in middle school or whatever it was, right? And hopefully we've all evolved and we know ourselves and what we want. One of the things that we looked at, Dan, is just how cultures are cults, and they hopefully are definitive and self-select. And so with you and Mike, it's very cool also that you guys lead that process. I don't know if you're familiar with Nubank, but their CEO, you know, still running a $60 billion company. He still onboards all of the new hires globally to the best of his ability, right? It's just that fucking important. And so when you talk to people like you or someone, when we're talking to smaller companies and the CEO is like, oh yeah, I've delegated that now. We're like, it's a red flag, man. Like, what could be more important than hiring people, bringing them on and making sure that they get going, right? There's just nothing else. But between you and Mike, will you elaborate I'm sure you guys have your differences. I'm sure you have your similarities, much like Andrew Sachs, my business partner. We tend to have the same values, but are wired very differently in different skill sets. And we think that that's pretty good. But how do you and Mike make it work? Where do you guys meet in the middle? What are your kind of non-negotiables as a duo?
Guy, your words here are, I love that. It really describes Mike and I. We absolutely have shared values. That is the magic in our relationship because he's a baby boomer. I'm Gen X. We come from different generations. There's 14 and a half years difference between us. We have very different lived experiences between the types of families we were raised in. Um, as he says, he was sort of raised to like, don't speak until spoken to, domineering father, like you stayed at the kids' table forever and you didn't, and I was raised by my parents to speak up and what do you think? And my dad taught me like, don't look up to anyone, look across the table at everyone. Because as soon as you look up at someone, they have to look down at you. So Mike and I just have these like really different experiences. He is way stronger than I am culinarily. He is substantially stronger than I am with the operational complexity, like the integration of the operating systems, the way an ingredient flows through the business, the way it's purchased and what it's cost and how it's cross utilized and, all of it. So he's got these skills I don't have. And in the beginning, we did everything together because, like, the beginning, it's just the two of us, and so we made every decision together. And then now I think we're a Venn diagram with an overlap of there's just some stuff that we'd never dream of making the decisions without each other. And so choosing a restaurant location, like the strategic topics, the way the brand is evolving, editing our constitution, these like the foundational things we always overlap on, and certain things, like for example, now where we need to reposition our alcohol menus, right? Society's changing, what people want, so we bring our thoughts together and we decide that together. There's overlap in there, and then there's a lot of stuff where we divide and conquer because that is efficient. I'm often in this role of being the face of the business, not because I want it. It's the least productive thing that I do. I recognize, especially nowadays, it's vital that businesses have this. But that's just not Mike's personality. He wouldn't ever want to do that. Wouldn't be his strength either, but he just wouldn't want to do it. I'm capable of doing it. So we have some just different skills and we divide those things. There's definitely like maybe he's more kitchen and I'm more front of the house, but it actually doesn't really break down quite that way. I do more of the capital raising, businessy stuff, but I hate even saying that out loud because it doesn't mean I'm not immersed with, the hospitality experience and the food and the beverage. But what's super cool about the partnership is the shared values, and maybe what that allows for is benefit of the doubt. And, when Mike does something, or I hear that Mike's done something that I disagree with, or I don't, I think my just absolute base, deepest value reaction is, oh, okay, well, let's see how that goes. Cool. Like I wouldn't have done it that way. Okay. And I just like benefit of the doubt with ideas, benefit of the doubt with the mistakes, grace for each other. He's so nice to me. The guy always has my back. When my dad had a stroke and then died, I remember saying to Mike, like, I'm just a fucking mess. And I don't know when I'm not going to be a mess. And he just said, yeah, of course. Like, great. Like, that's appropriate. That's it. There was no, oh, take whatever time you need. It wasn't that. It was just like, yeah, good. We're in it together. You be you. And he's been through stuff like we're both parents, kids have struggled. I had my concussion. Man, the partnership is like, it's just awesome because you make mistakes and you lose money together and you make wrong, and each of you on your own can make wrong decisions. So if that's the small picture, the big picture is shared value, benefit of the doubt, and just a feeling of good fortune that you've got this partner in your life. The other stuff is the little stuff, doesn't matter.
That's very moving to hear. Very cool. Look forward to meeting Mike at some point in time, and especially you when we get together in DC. It's extremely rare and you have to work at that. But just to have that absolute trust, right? Like in your spouse, in your work spouse. And if you can have both, because shit's hard and we're all emotional and it's hard in any given day. You can just kind of get confused or frustrated. It's so easy to have miscommunication. My business partner and I live 3,000 miles apart, right? And we talk all the time. But one of the things that I think Andrew has done a better and better job of talking about. He's such a good guy, but his first business partner and mentor died tragically in a helicopter accident, right? Joshua Freeman, and that's what started him on this career, right? So in an instant, he had to decide, do I further the work that we're doing through his family office at the time to invest in local businesses and to make them better, or do I stop? And he went out and raised his first fund, and now we're on fund 3. It'll be the last fund we ultimately raise, and we'll move to more of a permanent vehicle because we think it's more in line with how we think. But really, I mean, Andrew has sucked at telling that story because it's so important. It's so important to him. I think he's done such a better job. Hell, he's on 2 podcasts today, and just making sure that, much like you said, people have to know who you are and what you're doing. You don't get to hide. You can't kind of be up in the ivory tower. And most importantly, most people who are doing this type of stuff are doing it for a reason. And you owe it to your patrons of any kind for them to know. And so, yeah, I think it's very cool to hear that.
And Kai, for anyone taking capital, frankly, for anyone putting capital into something or sort of accepting capital from something, if you don't have a lens into the character and the why of the character of those people, you are taking the biggest possible risk that you could ever take in business or in life. And so, Andrew's story, and by the way, I remember when that helicopter went down, I remember that story. And I know, that's a whole family that loses their dad and their husband and their son, right? And all of that. And I had never thought about it from a business partner, or a colleague, losing that. But those are character defining things. Those are stories that should be shared. One, we should keep those memories alive, and we should be willing to reveal these things. So my little message to Andrew would be, if you think you're supposed to keep aspects of this stuff to yourself, when you can give people a lens into who you are and why you are, I think it is worth doing, because when it comes to business, that is probably the most important ingredient that can forget to be discussed when it comes to, making business decisions.
I think that's well said, and especially for what we do, because it matters. You've got to be aligned. And I haven't been on the other side of it as the entrepreneur. You've got some people who are not aligned. The analogy, I wrote an entrepreneur article about this a long time ago, or maybe it was for Inc. And it's like, the investors are chasing a meal. You're running for your life. And so make sure that you understand the difference.
That is a great line, and I'm gonna steal that line from you. So that's solid right there.
I'm sure someone said it before I did, but that's how I certainly felt when I penned that thing. So, but by all means, that's how we try to maintain the balance on both sides of it. It's got to be the win-win. And again, we steal from people who have done it a lot better for a lot longer, like the Buffett mongers of the world. Just try to find people who you like, trust, and admire, and work with them forever. So that's kind of how we try to think about it. And it's a bit atypical, but we've got to continue to. We get to put that forth with every company we work with. I want to be sensitive to your time, but there's a few other things I hope to pry out of you, starting with COVID was tough for a lot of businesses, and adversity not only stress tests us, but it tends to reveal a lot about our character and our fortitude. What was this like for you, for Mike, for your team? What did you learn from it, and how did you guys get past it?
It was unimaginably difficult, scary, and there's not a lot of point talking about it because whatever I might share from it implies that somehow someone else who's listening is supposed to take that lesson and be better prepared. It was just something that we were fundamentally unprepared for, couldn't have imagined, scared the absolute fuck out of us, dropped our revenue, at the time from 85 million to effectively zero, terrified us personally and professionally. And it's just our relationships and I think our deep reserve of experiences that got us through it. And we're just not quitters. So it was just sort of, well, I mean, it's cliche, but if it was either gonna kill us, because we obviously kept going to work every day, or we were gonna find a way through it. So I'm cautious about sharing too much about it. It was as hard for restaurants as everybody imagines that it was. Lots didn't make it, lots did. But man, I am glad I had the people on my team to go through it with, because what a fantastic Herculean effort our team put forth to get through it.
Dan, I get to learn from people like you when I get to conduct these types of things. You conduct a very successful podcast in your own right. Who have you learned from? Who have you emulated? People, companies, mentors? Who are some of the folks that have shaped you, that have, I think inevitably gone back into your team and your business?
Stephen Covey, definitely the most impactful mentor I ever had. I didn't know him. I only met him once. So he mentored me by writing books, and teaching seminars and giving conferences that I had the good fortune to read and attend. I just took his work and it seemed so obvious to me. I actually had a college professor give me that book sophomore year. I didn't read it until after I graduated. But like, wow, if this guy did all the research and these are the 7 habits that the most successful people do, doesn't take a genius to figure out you might want to do those 7 things. So Covey's been a huge impact on me. My partner, Mike, huge. I started working with Mike when I was 24 years old. So that he would have been 38 or 39. He was a great teacher to me. Is still a great teacher to me. Both my parents, I'm the youngest of 4 kids. My siblings, there aren't really many business people that I hold up, or frankly, many people at all that I say and I hold up and admire, because it would imply that somehow those people sort of have it all figured out. So I take bits and pieces from someone, from people, and try to absorb those things that people do or say. I love watching the interpersonal stuff, when I'm in the presence of a fantastic listener. I have to work hard to keep my mouth shut and listen. I know it is the most valuable skill. So those are things I take from, but I know that I admire that aspect of someone. But they might be a fucking asshole at something else, or suck at something else. So I don't have that typical like Warren Buffett is amazing, or the guy, or Ray Kroc. I love that story. I think I'm too in tune with the fact that everybody's flawed. Like everybody's got their glitches and their issues. So I like to take the bits and pieces. I love to learn by reading, and I love to learn by watching folks. And I think I also get a lot of lessons from the people that I am deeply and fundamentally unimpressed by, and I watch how people conduct business. And I think I'll never do that. I'll never treat someone that way. I sit on a couple of boards. So I'll hear boardroom conversations, I'll see boardroom conversations, and I'll think, I'd never talk to someone that way, regardless of the power that I might or might not have. So there's a lot of lessons for me in don't be that person. I'm really thinking about it. Like, I take that question seriously because I'm trying to always be on a learning journey. And I think what I'm describing to you is just how I go about that.
I think that's well said. I'm going to leave you shortly here, but the last one, um, oftentimes we think about kind of the future and where things are going and AI and all that type of stuff. But instead of going down that path, and I think you just touched on it a little bit, Dan, but imagine, you're two decades ago and you're coming off of a failure, a real setback in your career, and you're trying to figure out kind of what that next step is, and you've got your business, or maybe it's already going. Where would you encourage someone to go? Is it reading 7 habits? Is it finding a mic? Is it, how would you guide someone to go build, as you know, a world-class organization, which I think inevitably has to start with you?
Well, I have Jim Collins' new book right here, What to Make of a Life. I'm cautious about, I don't give anybody advice. I can share that my perspective is work on yourself, get clear. And if you're in a fog and you're not clear, that's okay and that's normal. And every human that you have ever seen who has ever accomplished anything has had phases of being, as Jim calls it, sort of lost in the fog. So work on yourself is it's the one thing that you can control. And so it's your mind, it's your body, they're your eyes, they're your ears, is your clarity to go seek and embrace the journey, especially when it sucks, because it is the suck that lets you enjoy the good stuff. You love the sweet in contrast to the bitter. So don't try to avoid the bitter. It's like, choke that shit down. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what goes through my mind of the place to do the work. There's a million great business ideas out there. The magic is not in your idea. The magic is in you and how you and your team then go about bringing that idea to life and handling the fucking fastballs that get thrown at your head and the kicks in the teeth along the way. Like, it ain't glamorous, this route, but it can be pretty awesome, including the sucky parts.
Dan, that was fantastic. We appreciate your time.
Kai, thanks for having me.